Subscribe because it's free.
The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for millennia, guiding countless civilizations into its vast, interwoven empire. Some joined willingly, others through carefully crafted treaties that eroded sovereignty over generations. It was an unchallenged system, a perfected strategy, until humanity, across the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council, the tension was palpable. The chamber, usually a place of controlled debates and quiet political maneuvering, was filled with raised voices and agitated diplomats. Representatives of 1,000 species had gathered, their holographic displays flickering with data, graphs, and projections, each one telling the same story. Humans refused to sign every treaty, every agreement, every offer of protection, of trade, of shared technology. Rejected. Counselor Varzek, a veteran diplomat of the Zolithian race, watched the spectacle unfold. A towering, reptilian figure, he was accustomed to the slow, inevitable submission of new species. He had personally overseen the absorption of over a dozen civilizations into the council structure. Yet now, he saw something he had never witnessed before. Fear. Not fear of war. Not yet. Fear of the unknown. Their behavior is irrational, his counselor directs, his chitinous arms clicking against the table. We have offered them security, stability, access to technologies centuries beyond their own. And they spit in our faces. They understand what we are, came the smooth voice of Counselor Jorvan, a being of liquid luminescence. They've studied the pattern. They know that every species that signs a treaty with us changes. Independence becomes dependence. Power becomes submission. They refuse because they see the truth. A ripple of discomfort spread across the room. It was an unspoken reality, one few dared to acknowledge openly. The Council had no need for military conquest. Their methods were more insidious, more refined. They absorbed civilizations slowly, reshaping their cultures until the very idea of resistance became foreign to them. Humanity was refusing that fate. The holographic displays flickered, showing a chronological record of past diplomatic efforts with humanity. The first contact met with cautious curiosity. The second, a formal exchange of knowledge. Then, the offers began: trade deals, resource-sharing agreements, defense pacts. With each attempt, humanity's response remained the same: a polite, yet firm no. Their independence is a threat. A deep voice rumbled, drawing attention to the far end of the chamber. It was Grand Counselor Vroth, one of the most powerful figures in the known galaxy. His crimson eyes surveyed the assembly, not just to our authority, but to the very structure we have built. Their defiance emboldens others. If one species can stand alone, others will begin to believe they can as well. This is not about humanity alone. It is about preserving order. A murmur of agreement swept through the room. The Council was not just an alliance. It was an empire in everything but name, and empires could not allow exceptions. An intelligence officer stepped forward, his uniform lined with the insignia of the Council's Covert Operations Division. We have analyzed their growth patterns. Despite rejecting our assistance, they have expanded rapidly. Their technology, once primitive by galactic standards, now rivals that of mid-tier Council races. They have no allies, yet they are not falling behind. Their resource output, military infrastructure, and fleet capabilities suggest preparation. The room fell silent. Preparation for what? Varzek's claws tapped lightly against the polished surface of the table. Are you suggesting that humanity expects conflict? The intelligence officer hesitated, then nodded. We believe so. There are indications that they are anticipating a hostile engagement with us. Despite our offers of peace, a wave of outrage erupted from the Council members. The very idea was absurd. The Council did not make war. Not openly. They did not need to. Treaties, sanctions, cultural integration, these were the tools of conquest. A species that resisted all of it was an anomaly, a danger. We have only two paths forward, Grand Council Roth declared, his voice final. Either we find a way to bring them into compliance, or we determine the extent of their threat and neutralize it before it is too late. A chill settled over the assembly. The unspoken reality had finally been acknowledged. Humanity had forced the Council into an impossible position. They could not be ignored. They could not be coerced. And if they would not submit, the Council would have to consider something it had not done in thousands of years, a preemptive strike. Elias Vance leaned back in his chair, watching the latest treaty proposal scroll across the holographic display. The language was, as always, meticulous, carefully constructed to appear as an offer of unity and cooperation, but the meaning behind it was clear. It wasn't an agreement. It was a surrender, disguised in diplomatic pleasantries. Across from him, Ambassador Lin studied the document with a faint smirk. "They're getting desperate," she noted, fingers tapping against the armrest. "This one doesn't even bother with subtlety. Economic integration, shared military oversight, open technological exchange. They expect us to just hand over everything. They don't understand why we keep saying no," Vance replied. "Because no one else has ever refused them for this long. Since first contact, humanity had been a curiosity, a relatively young species in the galactic scene. They had expanded quickly, pushing outward with determination that unnerved the more complacent civilizations of the Council. They weren't the most advanced, nor the most numerous, but they were unpredictable, and that made them dangerous. The Council had tried every standard method of assimilation. First, the appeal to unity, offering a seat at the table alongside the great galactic powers. When that failed, they moved to economic dependence, offering trade agreements that would slowly erode sovereignty. But humanity had seen what happened to others before them. Treaties started with mutual benefits but ended in absolute control. The moment a civilization relied on the Council's infrastructure, its autonomy was gone. The next phase had been subtle coercion. Pressures applied through indirect means, restrictions on trade. Intelligence leaks meant to destabilize human leadership. They had even attempted to stir internal dissent, hoping to push humanity into compliance. Each time, humanity adapted. Each time, they resisted. Vance pulled up a classified report on his display. The Council likely believed their methods were subtle. They weren't. Every intercepted communication, every suspicious shift in trade policy, every small betrayal from supposed allies, human intelligence agencies had tracked them all. The Council was waging a shadow war, and humanity had let them watching, waiting. "They think we're just being stubborn," Lin muttered, "that we're resisting for the sake of pride. They think we don't understand what's happening," Vance corrected. "They don't realize we've been preparing from the moment they made first contact." The Council didn't grasp how humanity operated. Their empire had been built on stability, on slow and deliberate control. They were used to civilizations behaving within predictable patterns. Humanity was different. Unlike other species, humans thrived in chaos. They were conditioned by history to assume betrayal, to adapt to shifting circumstances, to turn pressure into innovation. The more the Council tried to control them, the more resilient they became. The galaxy saw humanity as alone, a species with no allies. That was by design. What the Council failed to see was the growing network of silent supporters. Among the thousands of races under the Council's dominion, there were those who watched humanity and saw hope. Species that had once fought against the Council's influence, only to fall. They had lost their wars. But now, they saw a civilization that was doing what they never could, a species that refused. Through secret channels, humanity had established contact with those who wished to break free, not through grand alliances or open rebellion, but through quiet resistance, sharing knowledge, trading black market technology, spreading ideas, the first seeds of something the Council could not control. Vance set the report aside. The next move wasn't theirs. It belonged to the Council, and they already knew what it would be. "They're out of options," he said, standing, "and that makes them dangerous." Lin exhaled sharply. How long before they try something direct? Vance's expression was unreadable. "They already are." The Galactic Council's patience had run out. Varzek stood in the war chamber, watching the final vote tally illuminate the central display. The decision was made. Authorization for a preemptive strike. Approved. He exhaled slowly. The Council had always prided itself on diplomacy, on persuasion. War was an ancient relic, something only lesser species resorted to. But humanity had forced their hand. This wasn't about one species refusing treaties anymore. It was about control. If the Council let them continue on this path, others would follow. Stability would collapse. The Empire would fracture. The plan was simple. A covert fleet, consisting of elite warships from various Council factions, would engage in what was officially labeled a rogue operation, a deniable strike force. Their targets were human industrial centers, shipyards, and key orbital stations. The goal wasn't to destroy humanity, just cripple their ability to resist. Hit them hard enough that they had no choice but to come to the negotiating table. Admiral Retiz, a hardened tactician from the Vern Dominion, surveyed the gathered commanders. We move in 2 standard cycles. No unnecessary destruction, no civilian targets. This is a pacification operation. Once we strike, we issue an immediate demand for surrender. If they refuse, we escalate. The Council representatives nodded, satisfied with the illusion of restraint. But Varzek had an unsettling feeling deep in his core. He had studied humanity longer than most in this room. Something about their lack of panic bothered him. 2 cycles later, the fleet moved into position at the edges of Sol's gravity well. 200 warships, outfitted with the latest in Council military technology, slipped into human space. Cloaking fields active, weapons primed. The mission was proceeding flawlessly, until everything went wrong. The moment the fleet crossed into Mars' defensive perimeter, every human orbital platform activated simultaneously. It wasn't a response to their presence. It was a trap that had been waiting. Stealth systems failed instantly as sensor nets cut through their disguises with precision that should have been impossible. Before the first command could be given, human vessels emerged from behind planetary shadows, sleek, angular warships of unknown design, far beyond what intelligence reports had predicted. Panic rippled through the fleet. How had they built these? Where had they come from? No records indicated human industry capable of this level of technological advancement. A single transmission came through the fleet's shared comms. One voice, calm and measured. You shouldn't have come. And then the slaughter began. Human weapon systems didn't fire conventional plasma or rail rounds. Their ships move erratically, ignoring every model of space combat the Council had relied upon for centuries. The first Council warships were cut apart in seconds, their shields bypassed by weapons that defied expected energy output. The fleet scrambled to adapt, but there was no pattern, no logic. They weren't fighting a lesser species trying to fend itself. They were fighting a species that had spent decades preparing for this exact moment. Emergency retreat. Admiral Retiz bellowed, his mandibles clicking in raw fear. It didn't matter. The first retreat vectors were already blocked. Human ships had anticipated every escape route, cutting them off with precise warp interdiction fields. The fleet wasn't just losing, it was being annihilated. Varzek could only watch as the truth became horrifyingly clear. The humans had never been refusing treaties out of arrogance or ignorance. They had refused because they had always known what the Council would do next. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't luck. This was a species that had outplayed the Council at its own game. And now, the rest of the galaxy would see it too. The Galactic Council chamber was silent. A silence deeper than mere shock. It was a silence of realization. The fleet was gone, not defeated, erased. Of the 200 warships that had entered human space, only a handful had survived, and those that did were little more than drifting wrecks. The crews that made it back were incoherent, speaking in fragmented transmissions of a battle that hadn't been a battle at all. It had been a lesson. Varzek stood at the edge of the Grand Assembly, his claws tapping absently against the polished surface of the podium. The surviving admiral, if the broken creature before him could still be called that, had barely managed to relay the final moments of the engagement, not just the destruction of the fleet, but what had happened afterward. When the final Council ships had been disabled, humanity hadn't finished them off. They had boarded them, seized control without killing a single being, dragged the survivors back through the void, and let them return to the Council, carrying a message that was impossible to ignore. That message now played on the central holoscreen. A human stood alone against a dark backdrop, Earth's image hovering behind him. His face was unreadable, his expression not one of triumph or cruelty, but of certainty. You sent your warships into our system, believing we would surrender, that we would break the way others have. That was a mistake. The chamber remained still, thousands of delegates frozen in place as the voice continued. We did not refuse your treaties out of arrogance. We refused because we knew what they meant. We refused because we watched. We listened. We learned. We understood your methods before you even understood us. Varzek felt the weight of those words settle over the room. Humanity had known. They had always known. You believe we are alone. That without allies, without backing, we are weak. That is another mistake. The image on the screen shifted. Dozens of species, once thought loyal to the Council, appeared beside the human speaker. Some stood openly. Others remained in the shadows, their faces hidden, but their presence was undeniable. You have ruled through treaties and coercion, through careful control of history and force. But you forgot something. You forgot that control built on fear is fragile. You forgot that people remember the ones who stand against tyranny. A murmur rippled through the delegates. The names of these species were known, minor races, some barely registering as footnotes in galactic politics. And yet, here they were. You came to end our resistance before it could begin. Instead, you lit the spark of something greater. The feed ended. The chamber remained silent for several long moments. Then the shouting began. Some called for immediate retaliation, others for diplomacy, and some, those who understood what had just happened, remained quiet because they knew this wasn't just about humanity anymore. The Council's reign had just been broken.